Now joining us, Genevieve Jones-Wright. She's running for district attorney in San Diego. Genevieve, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm trying to figure out how you got all these folks to support you, because you have more endorsements than I literally think I have ever seen for any candidate I have interviewed. But what's interesting about it is you got some standard Democratic Party folks, honestly some big donors too, but also Real Justice PAC. That's Sean King's group, Democracy for America, the People for Bernie, California Nurse Association, Our Revolution North County. So how are you pulling this off as apparently the great uniter?
Just being authentically me and bringing a message that people can really get behind. Everyone can get behind true justice. And that's what my campaign is all about. It's about getting the status quo out of business. They've taken our justice system and they've made it big business for private prisons and the prison industrial complex. And it is time out for mass incarceration. And lots of people understand that. When you talk about the California Nurses Association, mass incarceration has to be talked about as a public health crisis. And so the message resonates all across because everyone understands the effect on communities when we talk about over-incarcerating and using our jails to solve problems. It gets us nowhere and it doesn't make us safer.
Okay, so let's talk about the current state of affairs before we go to your reforms. And I think these DA races are enormously important and making a huge impact when progressives win. For example, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia has really been a total game changer in that city. But right now, San Diego, where does this stand? Is the DA's office making any reforms or no?
No. We've seen in recent elections that San Diegans, along with the rest of California, have willed to go in a certain direction. And it is in a direction for criminal justice reform. And San Diego's DA's office has been against those very reforms, where we have been saying that we would rather incentivize inmates in our prisons to rehabilitate themselves, to get therapy, to get to the root cause of why they got to prison in the first place. Our DA's office opposed that particular proposition, which would be Proposition 57. They opposed Prop 47, which was willed to be by San Diegans as well, overwhelmingly, along with the rest of the state of California, saying that for some crimes, they don't need to be treated as felonies, and we don't have to give these harsh sentences for low-level crimes. And so the DA has not been supporters of criminal justice reform.
So now let's talk about your proposed reforms. What would you do differently that would have a material impact on San Diego?
Day one, I will implement a policy that would affect our bail system. Right now, we have a system that is focused on a person's ability to pay bail and not focused on a person's risk of harm or danger to our communities or whether they will return to court. And so if you are rich and dangerous, you can buy your way out of jail. But if you are poor and not a danger in the least, you will sit in jail waiting for months and maybe even years to have your day in court. One, it doesn't keep our communities safe. And two, it is not fair. And so that is something I could do day one. I also talk about day one disrupting the school to prison pipeline. And this is a very real issue, not only in San Diego, but across this county or the country as well. We are seeing where students who are mainly students of color or who go to school in poor neighborhoods are treated differently. They're punished more harshly, and they are ushered into our justice system. As the district attorney, these are things I can impact day one.
So what would you do with that disparity in the schools?
One, I believe that most of the things we're seeing our children disciplined for and getting pushed into our justice system, where they're being fed into our institutions and are being prepared for institutionalization, where they will then make it their homes in our jails and in our prison system after being a part of our juvenile system. We have to understand that some things should be dealt with administratively on school grounds. Everything doesn't warrant a felony conviction or even a misdemeanor. When we sit down with our children and we use restorative programs and the restorative processes, we will begin to ask our kids what happened to you as opposed to what is wrong with you.
Yeah, Genevieve, I'm not sure that I even like the word restorative. And I'll tell you, it's based on my experience. When I was a kid, I got into fights all the time. But we lived in a nice suburb, so nobody ever went to prison for getting in those fights. But they were, you could characterize them as assaults, as either the guy who started it or me or both of us, et cetera. We all could have wound up in prison, but we didn't, so we led nice lives. So instead, we talk about how we got to restore kids in poorer neighborhoods, et cetera. And the same thing that happens in the nice neighborhoods, that's nothing, maybe a detention, winds up, in putting them in prison. I mean, my suburb would have been shocked to have any of us go to prison over what were normal schoolyard fights. I mean, they shouldn't happen, right? But we've literally made criminal cases out of them.
You're absolutely right. And this is something I speak with parents about all around San Diego County, is that kids will be kids. But yet the numbers show that in San Diego, between the years of 2006 and 2016, your Latino and African American students are treated differently and more harshly by the district attorney's office by engaging in the same conduct as white children. And so for every one white child between those years prosecuted as adults, there were 5 Latino children and 12 African American children.
Wow.
So I agree with you tremendously that it really is about equal treatment. And it's not that we need to criminalize more children, but it is about taking a step back and saying that these are behaviors that kids engage in. Is it really criminal? Do we really need to institutionalize any child? And I do like the restorative process, because what we have designed, and it is by design, is a criminal justice system that seeks to be punitive and to punish. By its nature, the inception of our justice system was to punish people. We have a chance to have a justice system that restores, that brings people back and says, you know what? You can be redeemed. You have made a mistake, but that mistake does not define you, and it should not set you back. And so it's about having a justice system reimagined. It is about a justice system that gets to the root cause, and it's not just about kids. This can be used in the adult system, where we say you can be rehabilitated, and we shift the focus from being punitive and a system of retribution to a system of healing and a system of rehabilitation.
Look, I made 100 mistakes in my life, and honestly gotten away with it, right? And Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, they all smoked pot. They all got away with it, right? But other people are going to prison for it, and it just isn't right. And it's also not logical. In Norway, they have the kind of programs that you're describing, Genevieve, and their recidivism rates are so much lower than ours, meaning there is less crime. We have a system that creates more crime instead of less crime. That doesn't make any sense at all. So, but are people getting that message, especially in San Diego? San Diego, traditionally more Republican. Are you going to be able to convince them that they should actually be fair to all people, including communities of color, and that it is actually in their best interest, in everybody's best interest, to actually do criminal justice reform instead of doing the usual throw the book at them nonsense?
We started off this conversation talking about the people power behind my campaign. People understand now more than ever that over incarcerating can never be the solution, that we cannot incarcerate our way out of problems. People see that. And San Diego has this reputation. By the way, I'm born and raised in San Diego. We have always had a reputation that we are very conservative. In the city of San Diego itself, it is very solidly blue. Our county is actually more blue than red. Our leadership just does not reflect our values. We have pockets, such as in our eastern part of the county, where they are a little more conservative. But by and large, when we talk about criminal justice reforms and those measures, San Diegans have said overwhelmingly that they want to be less punitive and that they want to legalize adult use of cannabis. And people are clinging to this message. It's a message of hope. It is a message of redemption. It is a message of true justice because people are starting to see that there is not equal justice under the law, but everyone gets behind the idea that everyone should be treated equally under the law. And now people see that we have the hope of making that idea a reality.
All right, I want to give everybody links, then I'm going to ask you one random question. JonesWrightForDA.com is the website, JonesWrightForDA.com. And then there's the links to donate and volunteer, and they'll be in the description box if you're watching later on YouTube and Facebook. So, Genevieve, last random question is, this is my pet peeve, that wardens and prison guards are not taught the Stanford Prison Experiment. And it's crazy. We know what happens when you guard people. We know that it's human nature. So we should be aware of that and tell the guards what is likely to happen so that we can prevent abuses. If you're DA, is there anything you could do about that?
Well, I always talk about reimagining the role of the district attorney, and that includes getting out of the box, being a strong voice for measures in Sacramento, being a strong voice in the federal government, being a part of training, not just for law enforcement, but for the wardens and the prison guards that you talk about. They have a very strong lobby, but it is time for a district attorney to talk about all of the intersectionality within the justice system. And so absolutely, I plan on being a strong voice and working with people in that industry to make sure that we treat people humanely, that we treat people with dignity, and that we can ensure safety for every person, and that people are not being trampled over and their rights are not going to be neglected based on where they are.
All right, Genevieve Jones-Wright, strong candidate for DA in San Diego. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.